Do you remember the days when video games were an ever-growing, ever-evolving field with major innovations in technology? Today's game is a prime example of those times, for better or worse. My name is St. Corvus, and this is my review of the original Star Fox. Star Fox, or Starwing as it was known in my homeland of the PAL regions, is a pretty old game now, having been released on the Super Nintendo all the way back in 1993. This series might later have gone on to be known for the hit title Star Fox 64, but this original truly did pave the way with the idea of what a game of this type could look like back when the technology didn't quite fully exist. The Super Nintendo is very well known for its fantastic 2D library of classics such as Super Mario World, Super Metroid, and Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. But Star Fox here had Argonaut Software introduce a Super FX graphics chip that came installed onto every cart that gave the game more polygonal-based graphics on a home console game and created a truly 3D look and feel that was largely unmatched by other home console games before the era of true 3D gaming. While this display of innovation in technology is very impressive for what developers could achieve both with game production and ways to work within their limitations of consoles at the time, I can't say that the game itself manages to be a perfect experience. So let's go part by part and see what this series was like in its first iteration. Our story here takes place in the Lilat system, where the evil scientist Andros has sent an armada to try and destroy the planet Corneria. We play as Fox McCloud, skilled adventurer and leader of Team Star Fox, which also consists of teammates Falco Lombardi, Peppy Hare, and Slippy Toad. Together, you'll have to take the aircrafts called R-Wings across several planets and areas in space that Andros has sent his army out to attack, and make your way to their home base on the planet Venom to kill Andros and stop his evil war. That might sound like the setup for a story, but truth be told, that's the entire thing. There is no more narrative across the entire game than what I've just told you. We do have ourselves a small amount of dialogue at the start of each level from leader of the good guys General Pepper, and as you fly through the levels, your teammates will fly out and say an occasional line of dialogue, but that is the entirety of it. Is it basic? Yes. Is the story a little boring as a result? Also yes. The characters themselves have really cool designs, being entirely anthropomorphic animals, but not so far gone that the game can't be enjoyed by everyone. The characters do manage to show at least a little of their personalities in the small amount of dialogue they have, and the art of them does do a good job of showing and describing who these characters are in ways that there weren't words for. That's actually everything regarding the story though, so don't come into this expecting a fun narrative or interesting story segments. The main focuses of this game are definitely the gameplay and the technology, so speaking of, let's talk about the former. Star Fox is something quite different from the usual Nintendo catalog, a remnant from a time when Nintendo's selection of games on offer had a wide variety in gameplay genres and tones and age brackets. Star Fox is a classic rail shooter, meaning that your R-Wing ship is on a set path, and your job is to steer and shoot to make it to the end of the level where you fight a big boss and then move on to the next stage. There's of course a bit more to it than that, but that's the basic gameplay loop. In Star Fox, you have an action mapped to each of the 4 face buttons. One button which will fire your main energy shot, one that will shoot bombs which are limited and you collect through the levels up to 5 at a time, one button which will briefly apply the brakes and slow down your R-Wing, and one button which will boost you forward briefly to get past something quickly. The only other actions you'll be doing are obviously moving your R-Wing across the screen left, right, up and down, but also L and R will tilt your ship vertical in that direction, and double tapping either of these will perform a barrel roll in that direction. It's a basic control scheme, but the game doesn't feel like it's lacking anything from its toolkit to make it a more complete experience. The R-Wing doesn't control in a way that feels bad, but there is a constant persevering input lag which does make any movements or actions feel slightly delayed, and it can cause you to feel less responsive than it should be. Your ship and controls are only half the experience when it comes to the gameplay, as the levels themselves play just as important of a role in a rail shooter such as this one. For such a technically impressive and innovative game, Star Fox does actually have quite a few different levels on offer, each with their own personality, trials and tribulations to overcome, and even sometimes a feeling of a puzzle element with figuring out how best to navigate the levels. Each level features many enemies to shoot down and sometimes protect your teammates from, and these actually do have quite a wide variety in the way that they both fight and need to be fought. Objects in the environments of the level are just as much of a hazard as the enemies, with things like falling buildings or asteroids coming towards you posing a massive threat on your way through the levels. As some certain kinds of enemies are destroyed, they'll sometimes drop golden rings that you can fly through to replenish a small amount of your health, and levels have preset silver rings that heal a large amount of health and also work as a checkpoint if you die in the level. They're not the only preset things in the levels, as upgrades to your main laser and additional bomb ammunition can be found and picked up along with temporary armor for the R-Wing. The bosses in the game are quite varied in design and how you need to combat them, which is really quite fun but also highlights the absolute largest, most glaring weakness that this game has. Star Fox has a major problem, and that is the game slowdown in sections where there's too much going on at once. Multiple enemies flying around or shooting at you while you're shooting back at them, you're more than likely going to enter the single digits in frames per second. Big boss moving around while you're trying to fire at its weak points? Again, huge slowdown to likely single digit frame rates. This genuinely feels awful to play when it occurs and makes the slightly delayed R-Wing feel more like a Navy battleship. A level's enjoyment can be completely destroyed simply due to the fact that there was too much slowdown that it made it near unplayable. This goes hand in hand with the next point that I have to raise about the game. Star Fox is a short game, with one route to the ending taking you anywhere from 40 minutes to 1.5 hours on a successful run. The game is old school, and instead gets most of its playtime out of you by having a somewhat high degree of difficulty and making you replay the game when it's game over. Star Fox features 3 difficulty routes, each having their own set path of levels and bosses to tackle. The first route is nice and fun. I really enjoyed my time playing through a fair difficulty where I got to learn the game. The second difficulty path definitely ramps things up and will take a good amount of patience and practice to get through. The final path I found to be absolutely brutal in terms of player expectations and had more moments of slowdown than moments where the game ran at regular speed. I found the game so unfun to play due to this that I could only get roughly halfway through this path before I decided that it just wasn't worth continuing because I wasn't having any fun. The last thing I have to talk about with the gameplay is that I was surprised by how many levels in the game are played with the camera in first person, with you in the cockpit of the ship. It's been a long time since I've played Star Fox 64, but I don't remember that being a feature in that game, so I was quite taken aback by it, but I actually really enjoyed these levels a lot, both from a gameplay and visual standpoint. Speaking of, let's talk about the design. You can tell immediately from first glance that this game's visuals are quite dated and the game has some long years behind it. But if I'm being fully honest, I actually really enjoy the aesthetic of Star Fox. I can't speak for how it felt at the time, but the game conveys to me a retro-futuristic look, like the original Star Wars and other sci-fi series that I find a lot of charm in. Due to the evolution in graphics that this game presents, both your R-Wing and a majority of the enemies have a very polygonal look to them, but not in the way that Nintendo 64 games look dirty and polygonal. Here, despite the age, it looks simple, clean, and classy in its presentation. I can definitely understand if players in the current day struggle to be able to tell what's going on since there isn't the most amount of variety in colours on display at any point in time, but there's definitely something to be appreciated here. The sound design is genuinely impressive for the time too. The SNES Nintendo library had a lot of great soundtracks and Star Fox is no slouch when it comes to contributing to that. Sound design in general is quite good too. Everything has an old school compressed sound to it that helps with that retro futuristic vibe, and it all comes together to make quite a nostalgic little package in sci-fi gaming. All in all, Star Fox is definitely a cool little game that I'm genuinely glad that I went back to and visited, even if the experience is far from perfect. You definitely have a lot to admire here, with a cast of well-designed characters, a challenging and satisfying gameplay loop, innovations in home console technology and capabilities leading to impressive visuals, and a fun time for the ears. On the flip side, the technical limitations of the time mean that the gameplay experience can and will be greatly diminished on a regular basis due to slowdown to the point that players will feel deterred from actually seeing everything the game has to offer. A basic storyline without much narrative or dialogue leave the doors wide open for Nintendo to expand on this concept, take the idea of Star Fox, and do more with it when the technology will allow them to hone what's already good here. I will be giving the original Super Nintendo Star Fox a score of 5 out of 10. Do I think it's worth going back to if you're at all interested in the history of gaming? Yeah, sure, for a solid afternoon, but the experience is just a little too dated and limited to fully recommend deep diving in and becoming an expert at this classic title. That's going to be it for the review today. If you've made it to the end, then thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.